Nicholas Brown.
Question number 7, Mr. Speaker.
I very much enjoyed my recent visit to the Nissan factory in Sunderland for the launch of the first mass-market electric vehicle fully produced in the UK, which will support over 500 jobs at the plant and 2,000 across Britain's car industry, and I look forward to visiting the North East again soon.
Nicholas Brown.
When the Prime Minister next visits the region, he will again see for himself that the key issue facing the region is unemployment. There are over 20 applicants for every advertised vacancy, and his policy of local enterprise partnerships and enterprise zones is not making the same effective impact on the region's economy as the Development Agency did. Will he consider the appointment of a minister to work with the local enterprise partnerships and the individual members of Parliament for the region to push forward the private sector employment agenda?
Well, ministers do work with the enterprise zones, and let me just give him the figures. Obviously we want to see more, but employment in the North East is actually up by 9,000 since the election. The North East private sector jobs are up 37,000 since the election. It's not just the success at Nissan. We've obviously got Hitachi committed to building the new train building plant in County Durham. That will bring 700 jobs. We've also got the new Tyne Tunnel, which opened in 2011. The extra money going into the Tyne and Wear Metro. All of those things can make a difference. And of course, in the honourable member's own constituency, the youth claimant count has fallen by 4% over the last year.
Alan Beef.
Will the Prime Minister take the opportunity on his next visit to promote apprenticeships and the support that government is giving to them among North East businesses? And will he just take another look at the A1 in order to press the Ministry of Transport to get on with the job of doing it?
The last time I was in the North East, actually, I made a speech about apprenticeships, and I think it is remarkable the number of people who've started apprenticeships under this government. I can tell him in terms of the transport issue that he raises is actually we are funding feasibility studies into fixing problems on the A1 north of Newcastle to Scotland and the Newcastle Gateshead A1 Western bypass. And also we're improving the A19 between Newcastle and South Shields. This is a much better record. This is a much better record than the party opposite, even though they had a Prime Minister who came from the North East. They never did what we're proposing to do with the A1.
Fiona Berger.
Mr. Speaker, given the Prime Minister is so keen to talk about infrastructure investment, can he explain why his government has cut capital investment again in 2015-16 by nearly £1 billion?
I have to say to the Honourable Lady, she's wrong. If she looks at the figures, if you take the plans that Labour had for this Parliament, we've actually added to those plans and are increasing the amount of capital spending. But the real point is this: if you come to this House and you oppose changes on welfare, you oppose cuts to government programmes, you oppose the efficiency changes that we're making, and they haven't supported a single cut that we have made. If you do all those things, there's no way you'd have any capital spending at all. That is the problem with the weakness of the Labour front bench. Because they've taken no tough decisions, they can't support the capital spending this country needs.
Harriet Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the Prime Minister confirm reports from Jordan that a new treaty has been signed and that this country could have the pleasure of seeing the back of Abu Qatada as soon as this week?
I can confirm that this treaty has been taken through both the Jordanian Parliament and also our own, but I don't want to say anything that in any way could stop what we all want to happen happening.
John Cryer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When the government tried to get workers to exchange their rights for shares, we were told that 6,000 businesses would sign up. In the event, only 6 have even shown an interest. Not 600 or 60, but only 6. What went wrong?
6. Well, first of all, the programme hasn't started yet. It starts in September. And it's a programme that has been praised by the Institute of Directors, praised by the CBI, praised by the Federation of Small Businesses, but of course it hasn't been praised by Len McCluskey and the Unite Union. And of course, he's a member of the Unite Union, so he has to stick to their script. Well, what a sad day for democracy.
So we'll move on. Question 10, David Nuttall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question 10.
I very much much I enjoy all my visits to Bury. I look forward to visiting again, and I always take special time to look at the statue of Sir Robert Peel.
Mr. David Nuttall.
Mr. Speaker, whenever the Prime Minister does next find time to sample the delights of Bury Ramsbottom and Tottington again, will he join me in meeting with some of the hundreds of local small businesses and charities who will be £2,000 a year better off from next April because of the new employment allowance, which will cut employers' national insurance contributions, giving them a real incentive to create genuine new jobs?
I think my honourable friend is absolutely right. You can now walk down any high street in any town in Britain and point out to shopkeepers and businesses that if they do employ people, they're going to see a £2,000 reduction in their national insurance bill, and if they don't employ people, they can take people on and not pay national insurance. Now, that is only possible because of the tough decisions this government has taken on public spending, on welfare, decisions that have never been backed by the party opposite, but it demonstrates we're on the side of people who work hard and want to get on.
Douglas Robertson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister's deputy party leader in Scotland is describing the UK government's scaremongering about independence as silly, whilst one of his key donors in Scotland is describing it as puerile, and the country's leading Conservative commentator says it's tripe. Given the Prime Minister is in charge of Project Fear for the UK government, will he ditch this silly, puerile tripe?
I have a remarkable sense of déjà vu, Mr. Speaker, as I was asked precisely this question yesterday, and I'll give a different but pretty similar answer, which is if you look at the information that has been produced by this government on what would happen in terms of Scottish independence, I think it is impartial, extremely powerful, very sensible. And the fact is that the Scottish nationalists are losing the argument. They're losing the arguments on jobs, they're losing the argument on the economy, they're losing the argument on the influence that Scotland would have in the world. I say bring on the referendum because you're losing the battle.
Steve Baker.
Mr. Speaker, last Saturday, my Wickham Rotarians raised over £10,000 for local underprivileged people. I feel sure the Prime Minister will join me in encouraging membership of the full range of voluntary service clubs in the community, but does he agree with me that those wonderful voluntary institutions stand in stark contrast to the kind of institution which would try to block by political influence despite...
Friend is absolutely right, and it's a huge honour that I am an honorary member of my local Rotary Club in Witney. They're an important part of the big society, they raise a lot of money, they do an excellent job, and they certainly don't go round hoovering up members by making single payments from trade unions in order to buy influence.
Thomas Doherty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Back in March, the Climate Change Minister said, "I wouldn't be sleeping if we didn't have 10,000 signed up to the Green Deal by the end of the year." Given that so far only 4 households have signed up on the dotted line, is it then McCluskey's fault as well?
The honourable gentleman is wrong. The honourable gentleman is wrong about the figures. The fact is 37,000 households have had Green Deal assessments and over 5,000 have had their boilers changed. Now, sorry, I missed out that the honourable member for Dunfermline and West Fife, he too received sponsorship from the Unite Union. So I think, you do? Well, you better put the record straight. I suspect you ought to go through his constituency records, check all the members are still alive. That might be a good start.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has quite rightly won much praise for his work on dealing with tax avoidance, but some people have called him hypocritical. What does he say to that?
Well, I think what is hypocritical is to take donations from a donor in the form of shares in order to avoid taxes. That is what the Labour Party has done. They should pay back that £700,000 to the taxpayer, and that money should be going towards schools and hospitals. That is Labour's shame.
Gemma Doyle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the Prime Minister confirm that the latest work programme figures show that it is missing every single one of its minimum performance standards?
If the Honourable Lady is asking about the work programme, the fact is that it's actually got 312,000 people into work. 60% of the people going into the work programme are coming off benefits. And while the Unite Union and all the Unite members opposite might not want to hear this, and while it might not be part of Len McCluskey's script, the fact is this programme is twice as good as the Flexible New Deal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a doctor who once had to listen incredulously to a patient explain via a translator that she only discovered she was 9 months pregnant on arrival at Terminal 3 Heathrow, I was very pleased to hear that the Secretary of State for Health's statement on health tourism today. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that although the savings are modest, the principle matters? The health service should be national, not international.
I think my honourable friend makes a very important point. This is a national health service, not an international health service. British families pay about £5,000 a year in taxes to pay for our NHS, and it is right to make sure that those people who don't have a right to use our NHS get properly charged for it. Now, we've made this announcement. I hope there'd be all-party support for it, but Labour's Public Health Minister has condemned it as xenophobic, so I assume they are now going to oppose this sensible change, which working people in this country will roundly support.
Speaker, the bedroom tax is turning into a disaster in constituencies like mine. Families are moving out of good quality social housing and into the private rented sector at a greater cost to the taxpayer. 3 and 4 bedroom houses are now standing empty and are classed as hard to let. And I've even got pensioners approaching me saying they want to downsize, but they can't because small properties are prioritised for families. Is this not turning into a disaster for the taxpayer as well as for families?
What this is fair for the taxpayer, because we don't give a spare room subsidy to people in private sector accommodation, so we shouldn't give a spare room subsidy to people in council accommodation. But the question now is for the party opposite. We have decided to remove that spare room subsidy. They now say they support our spending changes. Well, they did for about 5 minutes last week. Is that still the case, or are they committed to repealing this? Absolutely no answer.
Mr Burstow. Indeed.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The shocking abuse that was revealed in Winterbourne View and by Operation Jasmine in Wales has revealed a gap in the law, which means whilst the staff get prosecuted, the organisations are never corporately accountable for what they are allowed to take place. Will the Prime Minister meet with me and a small delegation to discuss how we can plug this gap in the law and ensure there is proper accountability for abuse and neglect?
Well, I'm very happy to meet with the honourable gentleman about this issue because it is vitally important. I think in the Francis report there were a number of recommendations about duties of care and indeed duties of candour that we need to put in place, and I'm absolutely keen to make sure we get this done.
Mr Ben Bradshaw.
The Royal Charter, approved overwhelmingly by this House, still not been sent to the Privy Council when it should have been in May? And will he assure this House and the victims that he won't do a deal with certain newspapers to further water down Lord Justice Leveson's recommendations?
What I can say to the right honourable gentleman is that we have to follow the correct legal processes, and the legal advice which we've shared with the Leader of the Opposition and his deputy is that we have to take these things in order. We have to take the Press's Royal Charter proposal first, and then we have to bring forward the Royal Charter on which we have all agreed. I have to say, I think the Press's Royal Charter has some serious shortcomings, so no, I haven't changed my view.
Richard Drax.
Mr Speaker.
The gentleman wanted to be called. I've called him. You should be.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, very much indeed. I'm most grateful to you. Given that the selection of parliamentary candidates is a legitimate concern of this House, would the Prime Minister agree with me that the voting irregularities in the Falkirk constituency should be looked at as a matter of urgency?
Order! Order! The question's about a party matter.
Tunnel, which opened in 2011, the extra money going into the Tyne and Wear Metro, all of those things can make a difference. And of course, in the honourable member's own constituency, the youth claimant count has fallen by 4% over the last year.
Alan Beef.
Will the Prime Minister take the opportunity on his next visit to promote apprenticeships and the support that government is giving to them among North East businesses? And will you just take another look up the A1 in order...
Nicholas Brown.
Question number 7, Mr. Speaker.
I very much enjoyed my recent visit to the Nissan factory in Sunderland for the launch of the first mass-market electric vehicle fully produced in the UK, which will support over 500 jobs at the plant and 2,000 across Britain's car industry, and I look forward to visiting the North East again soon.
Nicholas Brown.
When the Prime Minister next visits the region, he will again see for himself that the key issue facing the region is unemployment. There are over 20 applicants for every advertised vacancy, and his policy of local enterprise partnerships and enterprise zones is not making the same effective impact on the region's economy as the development agency did. Will he consider the appointment of a minister to work with the local enterprise partnerships and the individual members of parliament for the region to push forward the private sector employment agenda?
Well, ministers do work with the enterprise zones, and let me just give him the figures. Obviously we want to see more, but employment in the North East is actually up by 9,000 since the election. The North East private sector jobs are up 37,000 since the election. It's not just the success at Nissan. We've obviously got Hitachi committed to building the new train building plant in County Durham. That will bring 700 jobs. We've also got the new Tyne...
to press the Ministry of Transport to get on with the job of doing it.
The last time I was in the North East, actually, I made a speech about apprenticeships, and I think it is remarkable the number of people who've started apprenticeships under this government. I can tell him in terms of the transport issue that he raises is actually we are funding feasibility studies into fixing problems on the A1 north of Newcastle to Scotland and the Newcastle Gateshead A1 Western